Now it's time to discuss business architecture and how it comes into play. As we've discussed in the previous couple modules, ranking objectives is very important to creating a business case for action. We need to be able to evaluate how these objectives rank based on factors like organizational and environmental attributes, any constraints that we might face in terms of the type of solutions we are allowed to undertake based on corporate policies or the regulatory environment, as well as our existing technical infrastructure, what might be required from our technology in order to complete objectives, and the potential value that we can seek to unlock, as well as how quickly and with what level of effect we can expect to unlock that value, as opposed to other alternatives we might turn to. However, this is all well and good, but you may have noticed that we have a glaring omission so far in our discussion. We've said that there are many questions that should be answered, but we haven't really talked about how to answer those questions effectively. That's because answering these questions can be pretty difficult, especially for a business analyst in a complex enterprise trying to understand how all of it works together. This is where business architecture can be so valuable. Business architecture provides a framework to better understand the business as a whole, to project the impact of changes across the entire business so that we can understand what our proposals or potential courses of action might mean, as well as to develop any proposed changes and plans using a common model and set of assumptions, rather than building things from scratch every time we go about the thought process of considering a potential course of action or change that we might want to make. Basically, a business architecture is a simulation or a model that we can follow that gives us an idea of how the business overall works in a more manageable, tangible form. A business architecture is comprised of a group of documents, models, and diagrams that can help us to see not only all of the policies that a business might have, but also how its processes work, why we do things the way we do things within the enterprise, what the business value of them and the philosophy behind them might be, and more. Some of the assets that we'd hope to see inside of a business architecture that would make it more valuable for us to work with as analysts would include information on a company's vision, as well as its mission statement, any strategic documents or overriding strategic goals and philosophies that help to guide the organization, information about the organization's functions, how we complete the businesses that we're in, how we do the work that we're supposed to be doing, rules and policies that guide our work and require things to be done in certain ways, whether these be internal or external in nature, the structure of the business, things like our organizational structure, but also the technical structure of the way that different portions of our resources and tools might function, the processes that we use in order to complete our work, as well as information on the locations where this work currently takes place or could take place based on the type of technical and human resources required to complete those sort of tasks. Oftentimes, we'll actually build two different types of business architectures. One that will serve as our foundation will show us how the business works currently and provide us with a simulated model that we can turn to answer questions about where we are in our present state. The other is based on this, but modified so that it can take into account proposed changes, so that we can see how future iterations might be different from the present as we deploy different solutions or alternatives. This now versus later comparison allows not only business analysts but also stakeholders to learn more about the impact of proposed changes and to be able to imagine them and visualize them in a more tangible fashion than would be possible without being able to tie it directly back to the business in a form that can be understood widely by many individuals. The focus when developing a business architecture should be purely on developing a viable model of the business. We should be trying to represent it as objectively, as fairly, and as honestly and truthfully as possible so that it can be most useful to us. We don't want to try to solve problems prematurely at this stage, but rather focus on understanding the business as it is, and once we have begun to come up with potential solutions, create other architectures with those solutions in mind so that we can make comparisons accordingly. Business architectures allow us to align the strategic and operational viewpoints that might differ within the business otherwise by modeling the process-level impact of changes. So we can understand not only what goals might be out there from a strategic point, but how this will affect the day-to-day frontline operations of our business. It shows the projected impact of changes across many different functional lines, both across the organization as a whole and how we might need to change the way that we do our work or the way that our organization is structured, as well as any functional changes that might come into place regarding the type of work we do or how we do it. Procedural changes in terms of the process we follow could also be shown here, as can any changes from a technical perspective. Finally, any geographic changes can be modeled here as well. If we're going to need to make a physical move to a new location as part of whatever our solution might be, then we can represent that and its potential impacts here as well. The level of detail found in a business architecture will vary depending on the size of the organization and the resources available to the business analyst. In a small organization, simply following the business's overall business plan, as well as the organizational charts, policies, and rules that the business analyst might be able to obtain, can be enough to give us a good idea of how the business operates. In larger organizations, all of the above are very important, but we may also have access to sophisticated modeling tools that would show simulated results on how things might change in a very complex factory, for example, if we were to make changes to our processes. We might include proprietary simulations and data sets here as well, in addition to other analytical tools that can allow us to be more technical and more fine-grained in the type of modeling that we do. Whatever the case is, we want to make sure to include enough detail so that the architecture can be useful and serve as a true and valuable model for us to work with, but we don't want to have so many variables that it becomes unwieldy or difficult to work with, given the tools that the analyst has available. After all, it's up to the analyst to be able to digest this information using the business architecture as a tool so that they can then repackage it and use the architecture and other assets to present their case to stakeholders. If it's too complicated, that might not be possible to first analyze and certainly might introduce some difficulties when it comes to presenting the findings as well. Developing a business architecture, simply following the process of creating one, can be very helpful in assisting business analysts looking to learn about different information related to the business. Being able to put together a model and a baseline simulation, even if it's a static one that you only find on paper, can give the business analyst a much better idea of how processes flow within the organization, how different departments might interlink and interrelate to one another, where there might be duplications of functions, where there might be potential bottlenecks or areas that could obviously use improvement. Looking into all of the different processes here can help the business analyst to have a better idea of what they can do moving forward, and will better prepare them to converse intelligently with stakeholders across the board, as they'll now have a better idea of the type of work those stakeholders undertake and the perspective that they face on a daily basis.